Chapter 2. The Fairy Council. Once the entire council had gathered, the fairy godmother took out the book of fairy tales. "Very well, then," she said. "If no one objects, we will read Lady Tremain's story, and perhaps my sister Nanny here will finally stop pestering me to help those monstrous girls Anastasia and Drizella once and for all." She winked to her favorite fairy trio, knowing they wouldn't let her down. Lady Tremaine. London may be far away, but we have found ways for our magic to reach beyond the many kingdoms, even into the drawing rooms for unsuspecting fancy lords and ladies. Take Cruella de Vil, for example. Even though her tale was written in her own voice, who do you think inspired her to write it? But this isn't Cruella's story. It's Lady Tremaine's. Lady Tremaine lost her husband early in their marriage and was left to care for their two young daughters on her own. Unlike most women in her circumstances, Lady Tremaine was well provided for. Upon his death, her stately lord of a husband left her a great fortune. That, combined with the fortune she herself had brought to the marriage, meant she was quite a wealthy woman. The lady of the house had everything she desired, except for one thing, her true love. She had lost him far too soon. What she did have, however, was a house full of servants, nannies, governesses, parlour-maids, cooks, a butler, pantry boys, boot boys, footmen, scullery maids, housemaids, a head housemaid, and of course her lady's maid, the elderly Mrs. Bramble. Lady Tremaine treated her servants well and with respect, and insisted her daughters Anastasia and Drizella do the same. The household staff doted on them. The Tremaines and their staff lived comfortably in their lavish London town house. It was always full and bustling with activity, so Lady Tremaine didn't feel quite so alone. She enjoyed giving her daughters the best life possible. Like most aristocratic Londoners, the Tremaines flitted to and from the country like birds, going hither and thither as the season dictated. One fateful day, the lady was about to embark on such a trip, unaware that it would forever alter the course of her life. We wonder what would have happened to Lady Tremaine and her daughters had Lady Tremaine decided not to visit her old friend, Lady Prudence Hackle. But then again, once it's written in the book of fairy tales, there is little one can do to change one's fate. Before the flurry of the day took hold that morning, Lady Tremaine sat in the front parlour, making time for a repose before her daughters woke or her maids came to her with questions about what to pack for their trip to the country. The front parlour had been one of her favourite rooms when her husband had been alive. They spent many quiet moments there, enjoying their coffee in the mornings, or sipping drinks after a night out, or just sitting in their own corners of the room enjoying a good book. She was missing those days more keenly than usual, and found that in the silence of that morning she could almost feel her husband with her. It was a bright, sunny parlour with large French doors that opened onto a balcony with a breathtaking view of the city. She loved the sounds of the city, bustling below, and would sit for hours listening to musicians playing on the corner, always making sure to have one of the boot boys take some money down to thank them for entertaining her. Like almost every other morning, the lady went to her desk, took a few coins from her drawer, and pulled the cord that hung to the left of the fireplace. It called her butler, Mr. Avery, who had been in her household for years. He had been there when her husband was still alive, and she felt that in a strange way he had taken her husband's place. At least in that he was always there to care for her. Avery was a tall, lanky, stoic man, with black hair distinguished by a white streak on the left side. His face was heavily lined, almost like chiseled rock, and his eyes were deep brown. "Good morning, Lady Tremaine," he said when he entered the room, making her smile. She knew he wouldn't return the gesture. He was too austere, too serious, and far too busy for things like smiling. Lady Tremaine was almost sure Avery's pants could catch fire and he would never let on, if he could possibly avoid it. That was just the sort of man he was. Good morning, Avery. Could you please have one of the boot boys take these coins down to the musicians on the corner? To those musicians on the corner, and have Daisy bring me my coffee. Avery narrowed his eyes at his lady, but said nothing. Do you disapprove, Avery? She asked, already knowing what he would say. They'd had several variations of this conversation before, and it was one of the chief reasons she felt Avery sometimes took her husband's place. He, like her husband, was a man who preferred things done by the book, and ladies didn't do things like send coins down to musicians who performed on corners. It is not for me to approve or disapprove, my lady, he said, taking the coins from Lady Tremaine and then adding, Oh, and, my lady, Nanny Pinch was wondering if she could bring the girls to see you this morning rather than this afternoon. Lady Tremaine sighed. Oh, yes, they will be out shopping this afternoon. I forgot. Yes, tell Nanny Pinch to bring them if she must. But Avery, please wait to do so until after I've had my coffee. You're probably the only person alive I can abide talking to before I've had my coffee, she said, laughing. Yes, my lady, he replied, and left the room. The lady laughed to herself again, wondering if she would ever get the man to crack a smile. It had become her personal mission, to make Avery smile. She took her rose-colored shawl from the back of her chair, draped it around her shoulders, and sat on the red velvet couch. The room had felt so lonely since her husband had passed away more than 6 years ago, and she wondered why she still used it as the family room after he was gone. She supposed it was out of habit. All the ladies used their front parlors in this way. This was where the ladies of the house spent their mornings, greeted their children, or entertained their closest friends. Larger gatherings were, of course, held in grander rooms, but Lady Tremaine hadn't held a large gathering since her husband was alive. These days the lady attended parties at the house of others. She was besieged by invitations after her husband died. Well-meaning and thoughtful invitations meant to distract her from her grief. But now that so much time had passed, she was starting to long for the days when she was the one to throw the party, and she missed having someone to walk up the stairs with after the last party guests left, and someone to chat with over breakfast about their plans for the day, or in the evening after going to the opera. She wondered if it wasn't time to consider finding a new companion, a new husband. When she woke up that morning, she hadn't expected this was something that would cross her mind, but as she sat on the red couch in her parlor, she felt she might at least be ready to fall in love again. Ah, Daisy, said the lady, looking at the sweet-faced little maid who brought in the coffee. She was hardly more than a girl, with sparkling eyes and small, delicate features that reminded Lady Tremaine of a little mouse. Please put the coffee there. Thank you, Daisy. The maid placed the coffee service on a small round table in front of her. It was Lady Tremaine's favorite coffee set, black with gold trim. Cook would like to know if you want a breakfast this morning, my lady, Daisy said timidly. Lady Tremaine laughed. Her cook, Mrs. Prattle, prompted her maids to ask this every morning, knowing full well what her answer would be. Please tell Mrs. Prattle just to send something up for the girls in the schoolroom, if she hasn't already, and we will want a packed lunch for our journey to the country. The lady smiled at the mouse of a maid. Yes, my lady, she already has a hamper packed for you and the girls. She quickly corrected herself. I mean, for Miss Drizella and Miss Anastasia. Lady Tremaine wondered what types of women her servants had worked for before coming to her household. Of course, she wanted the staff to be sensible, diligent, and respectful, but she didn't insist on unnecessary formalities, not when they were alone, at any rate. Oh, sure, when her husband was alive, they would throw lavish parties, and she'd always liked giving her lord and lady friends a good show with all the proper formalities from time to time. And of course she had an air of reserve when speaking to her friends' servants, which was to be expected. But she always left a little something for them at the end of their stay. She wondered if her friends were like this too. She wondered if they weren't all just putting on a show. Perhaps when they were alone, they were more real with their servants, treated them like people, talked to them, asked them about their days, and smiled at them. She hoped they did. It made her feel less lonely to have so many servants about the house. She had no illusions about them actually being actual friends, but there was no reason not to be friendly. Thank you, Daisy. You can tell Nanny Pinch she may bring the girls in now if she likes, unless Avery has already done so. I'm sure he has other things to attend to for our trip. And Daisy, I will tell Avery that he's to arrange a little outing for the staff who aren't coming along with me, said Lady Tremaine. Yes, my lady. Daisy left the room with a smile. Lady Tremaine had known the news of an outing would bring a smile to Daisy's face. But then again, it was easy to make Daisy smile. Lady Tremaine sipped her coffee, wondering when her little hellions would come storming into the front parlor. She loved her daughters, but they were quite the handful, and the older they got, the more difficult it became to rein them in. She had been indulgent with her daughters after their father died, giving them whatever they pleased, doting on them, finding them the best governess, taking them on splendid holidays, buying them whatever they wished. If they wanted new dresses, they got them. If they asked for horses to ride when they were in the country, Lady Tremaine could hardly say no. There was nothing her girls wanted that they didn't have, but this was the very reason they were becoming harder to please. Lady Tremaine dreamed of the day her daughters would be married. She dreamed of a life of her own with a man she loved. And if she was lucky enough to find true love twice, she would be content with solitude. But the quiet of the morning was disrupted the moment she contemplated her delightful future, as if her daughters sensed she was at ease and peace. Avery came in first, as was his custom. My lady, Nanny Pinch is here with Miss Anastasia and Miss Drizella. Lady Tremaine winced. She couldn't help wishing she had waited just a few more precious moments before suggesting they should come see her. Yes, show them in, Avery. She put down her coffee cup and motioned for it to be taken away. Anastasia and Drizella were 11 and 12, respectively. Neither of them looked like their mother, nor their father for that matter. The girls couldn't have been more different from their stately mother. While Lady Tremaine was angular and severe-looking, she was still a very handsome woman. Her daughters were all points and edges, all legs and arms with gawky necks, bird-like faces, and bulging eyes. They would have made remarkable witches, those two. But that is another story, a story that never happened, though it would be very intriguing to explore. Nevertheless, Lady Tremaine thought her daughters were beautiful and told them so at every opportunity. On this day, both girls were dressed in their fanciest day dresses, Anastasia in pale pink and Drizella in soft blue. They were ready for a day of shopping with Nanny Pinch. This would give Lady Tremaine the solitude she needed to prepare for their trip to the country, and Lady Tremaine was grateful to Nanny Pinch for having the foresight to get her girls out of the house for a few hours while she took care of the necessary arrangements. Lady Tremaine adored Nanny Pinch. She was a sensible woman, still young and full of energy, which she needed in abundance to keep up with Anastasia and Drizella. She was a petite woman with dark hair and eyes and a splash of prominent freckles across her cute little nose and cheeks. She was hardly taller than the girls. Lady Tremaine laughed at the thought of her girls one day towering over their nanny. Good morning, my lovelies, she said, smiling at her daughters. Drizella always had the privilege of kissing her mother first, since she was the eldest. Good morning, mother, she said rather formally, making the lady laugh herself. Lady Tremaine wondered how long they had practiced that in the schoolroom before they came downstairs. Anastasia, however, didn't stand on ceremony and leapt into her mother's arms. Good morning, Mamma, she said, almost knocking over the little round table with the coffee service. We discussed this, Anastasia, said Nanny Pinch, giving the girl a stern look. If you refuse to act like a proper young lady, perhaps then it is best you stay in the nursery when we visit the country. Zella's eyes grew larger than normal, and she pinched Anastasia harder on her upper arm. Ouch! Mama, look what Zella did! Nanny Pinch quickly separated the girls. Miss Anastasia, you sit there, she said, pointing to one chair, and Miss Drizella, there, she snapped, pointing to another. The chairs were on either side of a small table and situated across the Lady Tremaine, who was still residing on the velvet couch. Your mama doesn't have time for this nonsense, and it's not too late to change our plans for the country. We could just as easily stay here at home while your mama goes off and enjoys some much-needed time on her own. The girls clasped their hands together tightly and placed them on their laps, smiling sweetly. Lady Tremaine could see they were both doing their best impressions of proper young ladies, and she had to keep herself from laughing. That won't be necessary, Nanny Pinch, but we shall keep that option in reserve should my dear girls decide that a holiday in the country is just too much for them. Both of the girls wiggled in their seats, waiting desperately to squeal out, but managing to keep their composure. Lady Tremaine smiled indulgently at her girls. Don't you two look beautiful today? Miss Pinch tells me she is taking you out for a day of shopping. New dresses for our trip. I want you both looking your best and on your best behavior while we're in the country. Do you understand? Both girls nodded their heads. Lady Hackle and her sons, Dicky and Shrimpy, will be there, said Lady Tremaine. Drizella's eyes grew large again, making Anastasia laugh. Drizella has a crush on Dicky, she said, laughing harder. She's going to make a fool of herself, Mama. Drizella practically leaped across the small table to slap her sister on the arm, knocking over a small jade dragon figurine in the process. Girls, stop this at once. No one has a crush on anyone, and if you can't stop acting like little monsters, then you will stay at home, said Lady Tremaine, starting to lose patience with them. Drizella put her hands on her lap again. Why shouldn't I have a crush on the young man Mama eventually wants me to marry? Though her daughter was right, Lady Tremaine and Lady Hackle did have plans for Anastasia to marry Shrimpy and for Zella to marry Dicky. She felt Zella was far too young to be daydreaming about marriage. Well, I'm not going to marry anyone named Shrimpy, Anastasia wrinkled her nose, making her sister scoff. No one would want to marry you anyway, cried Zella. Why would you want to marry someone named Dicky? That's a stupid name, too, Anastasia taunted. Hush now, both of you. Nanny Pinch was stern but calm. Anastasia, you know perfectly well their names are Richard and Charles. Anastasia laughed again. Well, Shrimpy seems like a silly nickname for someone named Charles. It doesn't make sense, and he's actually rather quite tall. So how he ended up with such a name is beyond me. Once again, you lack the wit to get the joke, Zella scoffed. His name is Shrimpy because he is very tall. It's like calling a portly man Slim, or calling you Belle, she added with a wicked grin. Oh, you, said Stasia, leaping out of her seat and pulling the bows out of her sister's ringlets. That is enough. Both of you, stop this at once. This time it wasn't Nanny Pinch who intervened. It was Lady Tremaine. Neither of the girls had ever heard their mother raise her voice to them, and it caused them both to stop their antics at once and stare at her. I think Nanny Pinch is right. I have decided it's best that the two of you stay at home. How can I expect you to accompany me to the countryside if you can't behave like ladies? Both of the girls burst into tears, wailing and pleading with their mother to let them go. I'm sorry, girls. I have been far too indulgent with you, and it is time for you to grow up. It's my fault, really. I spoiled you, but it's time you learned that there are consequences to your actions. Lady Tremaine thought she was doing what was best for her girls, who were far too used to getting their way. It was time she did something about it. Mother, please, don't leave us alone with Nanny Pinch. Please, we won't see you for ages, screamed Anastasia. But Lady Tremaine was resolute. No, my dear, I've made up my mind. I will be going on this trip without you. You will be in good hands with Nanny Pinch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a trip to prepare for. I suggest you go up to the classroom and finish your studies, said Lady Tremaine, trying her best to fool her girls into thinking she really intended to leave without them. The fact was, She was just trying to scare them into behaving. The classroom? But Mother, what of our shopping trip? What about our new dresses? Screeched Drizella. Both of the girls were panicked. I can't believe you're doing this to us, Mama. I hate you, said Anastasia, screwing up her face. Lady Tremaine wasn't used to taking this sort of line with her daughters, and she didn't find it easy. In fact, she found it exhausting. It was causing her head to hurt, but she made her face passive and remote and held her ground. I see no reason to buy you new dresses for a trip you will not be taking. And considering you hate me, I see no reason to bring you along. Drusilla dashed out of her seat and grabbed her mother's hands, pleading with her. You really mean to leave us at home, Mama? This isn't a trick? I can't believe you would do this to us, your only daughters, the only things you have left of Papa. How do you think he would feel if he knew you were treating us so poorly? What would he think of you ruining my chances with the young Lord Hackle? Lady Tremaine took a deep breath and let in with a heavy sigh. I have ruined you. I gave you everything, and this is how you treat me? You try to manipulate me by using the memory of your dear, sweet father? You were so young when he died, and you hardly knew him. He would find your behavior appalling, and he would be disappointed in me for raising you to become such terrible little beasts. I wanted this house to be a place of love, a place where people could show their emotions. I thought if I took a more active role in your lives, you would love and respect me, that you wouldn't grow up resenting me, but I find now that I resent you. I should have just let you be raised by the servants. I should have limited my time to an hour a day after tea time like all the other ladies I know. She hated taking such a hard line with them, but she felt it was for their own good. You're right, Zella. I was trying to trick you, to scare you into thinking I wasn't going to take you on this trip. I would have never dreamed of going anywhere without my precious girls. But at the moment, I can't stand the sight of you. Nanny Pinch, take them upstairs at once, and that is where they will stay. Do you understand? Drusilla and Anastasia cried and reached out for their mother as Nanny Pinch took them both by the arms and tried to lead them out of the room. It broke Lady Tremaine's heart to do this to her daughters, but she was at a loss. She had done it all wrong, and she worried she had ruined her daughters forever. She took another deep breath, pressed her fingers to her aching head, composed her emotions, and tried to sound stern. I will come up to say goodbye before I leave, girls. And Nanny Pinch, please have Daisy sit with them. I want you to come back down so we can talk alone. Things are going to be very different around here from now on, and we have a lot to discuss before I have my trip. Lady Tremaine watched as Nanny Pinch silently took her daughters out of the room. As soon as the door closed behind them, she broke down in tears. She had never been so harsh with her daughters before, but she didn't know what else to do. They had become unruly. Nanny Pinch had tried to discuss it with her in the past, but she had refused to see her daughters clearly. She had refused to believe they weren't the angels she had always seen them as, and she had to wonder what her husband would think of her now. He wouldn't have approved of the way she was raising her daughters, and he certainly wouldn't have approved of the casual manner in which she spoke with the servants. She had let things slip after he died. Though he loved her and was always kind to her throughout their marriage, he had been a rigid man, always doing everything by the book, always proper and stoic, always on point. She loved him for it, and she didn't understand why she had changed so much after he died, why she allowed herself to become so soft, so familiar with the servants. As she sat there, she realized time away in the country without her daughters was exactly what she needed. She needed time to think, time with her friends, riding horses and hunting foxes, time to play silly games without having to worry if her daughters were going to embarrass her, time to become herself again.